Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video. AITA for not wanting to live with newborn. My 23 male, brother Louis, 16 male, stunned us all in May when he announced that his girlfriend, 16 female, was pregnant. Our parents were not at all encouraging. My mother forced him to leave after several conflicts, and our father refused to accept him. He has been living with me and my flatmate, Alex, 23 male, since late August. He does not pay rent, but he will pay for food. The infant was born in January. My nephew lives largely with his mother, whom Louis sees every day after school and visits on weekends. Louis never asked me anything about it. He simply showed up with the baby. It's been a nightmarish experience. He howls all night, keeping me and Alex up, smells terrible and spits. He produces more washing up than we've ever had to do, and there are no advantages to having him around. After a month, I determined that this had to come to an end. Louis will have to spend a couple evenings a week at his girlfriend's home to spend time with his kid, but he won't be able to continue bringing him to mine. He was dissatisfied, but grudgingly agreed. Despite this, he showed up with the infant again this weekend. He tried to sneak in unobserved, but his sobbing alerted us to his presence. Louis informed me that his partner had refused to accept my suggestion and had forced him to take the kid home with him. When he returned from the baby's mother's house on Monday, Alex and I warned him flatly that if he brought the kid here again, he would be kicked out. We both work shifts, so we sometimes don't get home until 4 or 5 a.m. and need to sleep. Louis first hesitated to comply and protested, but he has now grudgingly accepted and informed his girlfriend that their kid is not allowed here. His girlfriend is upset about this and has taken it out on him. I understand that they are young, weary, and anxious all of the time, so I feel horrible for making Louis' life even more difficult. But his burden rapidly became our burden as well, and it was not something I or my flatmate consented to. I believe that if we had had the opportunity to reach an agreement before the baby's arrival, this would have been a lot simpler, but Louis never mentioned it to me. AITA? Story 2. AITA for telling my sister it's her fault nobody likes her husband. I'd like to request that you participate in some cultural relativism here. You don't have to agree with our procedures. Simply accept them for the time being in order to comprehend this message. We come from a society where it is traditional to pay a dowry when a woman marries. This is known as a customary marriage, CM, and that is what one must do in order to start a life. The CM serves several functions. It demonstrates that a man is serious about you. He will have worked to save and declare his commitment to you and your family. It joins your family to his. It is the proper way to marry a woman. It honors a woman's parents, family, and community. And it informs the ancestors that you are leaving the home. The CM is one of our society's guiding principles. We are a family-oriented people, and that is how families are formed. Now my sister has opted to marry a guy from another culture. He declined to marry her in the traditional manner since it was demeaning, barbaric, and backwards. Everyone urged her not to marry a guy who saw her in that light, but she stayed with him and had a European wedding ceremony. Our parents were unsupportive, although they did show up for the church ceremony. In our society, this is already a tremendous faux pas. To make matters worse, her spouse is frequently unpleasant and disdainful to our culture. They all dwell in our own nation. He walks inside my parents' house and addresses them by their first names. This is not done with anybody older than you, particularly your in-laws. My parents attempt to get beyond the lack of a traditional marriage and treat him as their CL nonetheless, but he always throws it back in their face. The other guys who've married into the family have get-togethers and outings. He was invited once and then never again. My parents killed a cow for a feast after I delivered my kid, which was not done when my sister had hers. My mother's also moved in briefly to assist me as a first-time mother, although she simply saw my sister on a daily basis. She came in weeping about being treated unfairly and how everyone was cruel to them. I'm exhausted and irritable since I have a new baby. I told her it's her fault she's been treated this way. She opted to leave her culture in order to placate a guy who considers her beneath him. She never taught him how to act or conduct oneself in a culturally acceptable manner, and he is continually rude. He exudes an intensity reminiscent of colonial settlers, which none of us like. The cow that was killed was one that my husband handed to me as part of our marriage deal. Her husband never did this, thus there is no cow to. She decided to forge her own path and reject our ways. Nobody compelled her to follow our traditions, so she can't force us to follow ours. She wants to enjoy pleasant aspects of our society without having to go through the correct channels. She wants to have her cake and eat it too. I informed her she was in a situation she had created for herself. She had two options: fix it or learn to live with it. Ada, edit. Please do not message me. You may say anything you want me here. I'm not interested in messages. Also, I think asking whether we've learned his culture is a little silly considering that we're a former colony of his nation, and his culture is pretty much prevalent worldwide. I promise that most people who have been victims of Western imperialism, that is to say, almost everyone outside of Europe, have a rudimentary awareness of your civilizations. We had no option because to forced assimilation and colonization. The name. I know it seems insignificant to Westerners, unless they're a youngster. Individuals aren't addressed by their first names here. You do not address somebody older than you by their first name. Because you and your husband are one, you should refer to your in-laws as your parents. If your parents' names are mother and dad, you may call your in-laws mom and pa. That doesn't sit well with you. No problem. Name them Mr. and Mrs., auntie and uncle, or anything else that identifies their status to you. This is about humbling yourself and respecting your elders, regardless of your age. I had 3,000 characters and could really immerse myself in it. Nothing was spoken in a negative manner. It was just a pragmatic decision. There are too many answers for me to devote 1:1 attention to everyone, and some are outright hostile, so I have no desire to engage. Thank you for participating and providing comments. A special thanks to everyone who provided really helpful input. Good night. Edit 2. What a crazy journey this has been. Thank you for making me laugh. Some of you expressed concern for my well-being on Reddit. Infants, please don't worry about me. Unhealthy, happy, and loved. I'm content and confident in who I am and where I come from, and that won't alter if others project their problems onto me. I hope you're taking care of yourself as well. Take care and have a wonderful year. Update. Hey, here's an update. People have requested for updates, so I'll provide them to anybody who is interested. About 2 weeks after the first incident, we attended a family meeting at my parents' house. My sister phoned it, and she clearly had a beef with me. She shouted at my mother for the same reasons she yelled at me: favoritism, preferential treatment, calling her a horrible parent, and so on. My mother burst into tears, while my father burst into laughter. My father gave her a severe reprimand, which she was completely unused to since he'd never truly reprimanded her before, youngest child. We got to the point where we had a sobbing sister, a crying mother, and a crying father on the verge of a battle, so my other siblings and I had to play mediator. I asked her what the underlying reason was. Some of you called it. She was realizing how much she'd given up by marrying a guy who didn't value her culture. She was concerned about the consequences of her children's and her own lack of cultural customs. She's apparently getting cold shoulders from soap people as a result of her decisions. She's a social butterfly, so it's a tough pill to swallow. She returned home to beg her boyfriend to rethink conventional marriage. She informed him about her fears and how it made her feel, and he rejected it as voodoo rubbish, stating she was more sensible than that. She's gone back home with my parents while she decides what to do with her relationship. I don't care if you're sad that she wants to marry according to our society and how women are purportedly complicit in their own enslavement by doing so. Save yourself the effort of repeating the colonial feminist myth that we must be saved from our traditions. We're okay. Thank you to everyone who pointed up the above-mentioned blind spot. I'm doing all I can to help her and my nephew get through this. Take precautions,